while this presentation is going to focus on, it's going to talk about the 19C, it's primarily going to focus on the printer. And I haven't found anyone that disassembled the printer, or there's one guy that did kind of a verbal discussion of it. But
it's the same printer as the 10A.
Yes, correct. And those 10As are scarce as hen's teeth, right?
How many people are at one?
What's that?
How many people are at one of those?
Oh, I don't have a 10. Yeah, there you go. There's 2 or 3. Okay.
I do. I used it for my numbers on the previous presentation, so don't trust
Kidding. Let's dive into this. So just a brief history of the 19C, and I'm not going to read all this, but you know, it's a Stain series engineering calculator. This just basically came out of Wikipedia. So using a thermal printer, one of the few, you know, at least the handheld versions, you know, at least from HP. 4 NiCads, had 30 registers, and was named Bonnie, and of course it was named Clyde, and then the 29C was Bonnie. And I think that number matches what I saw in Gene's spreadsheet at 345, you know, when it first came out, was first introduced. So, quick health checks, you know, kind of what, got this thing, what do I do with it? You know, it turns on or maybe not turns on. You know, check the battery pack, should read somewhere around 4.8 to 5.6 volts if it's fully charged. Charge the battery pack. Chances are, if it's been seen around, those terminal conditions need to be sanded off, or you need to take some light sandpaper and scuff the battery terminals inside the calculator, or use some white vinegar if it's, you know, take a Q-tip and kind of get the corrosion, any corrosion off of it. So if you get a charged battery pack and you insert it into the calculator, turn it on, you should see the word error show up. If it's been off, if the battery's been out for a while. And then the next thing is you hit clear X and it'll turn into your beautiful 0.00 if everything's working. Otherwise, you get a blank display and you're confused and you're scratching your head and saying, gee, I don't know what's going on with this, you know. So, could be a whole variety of things. I mean, it could be batteries, it could be internals, it could be corrosion if you haven't opened it up and decide you don't want to open it up. You need to repair something and do something to it. Definitely recommend Bernhardt's you know, comments on museum, the HP museum, and the things he's published, because Bernhardt's really dove into the HP-19C. So for 90% of the problems, you see a lot of things that he's done, and I'll refer you to him for some really in-depth discussion on it. Yep.
If you apply power and the display doesn't show,
Yep.
do you ever measure the current to see whether it's low or zero or anything like that?
You can do that. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. But that usually requires sticking a power supply on it. But yeah, you can do that. You know, if you're trying to measure the current, or you can loop the battery through a couple contacts. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So Bernhardt's done a lot of very thorough discussion on it, and I'm just going to basically, from here, we're just going to talk about how to take it apart. So if you're interested, that's good. If not, just kind of follow along, and you can see how you open up the case. So there's 5 screws in it. It's showing the 2 that are inside the battery compartment, and there's 2 underneath these feet on the top, and then there's 1 near the battery charger terminal. So there's nothing on the bottom feet, so don't mess with the bottom feet. There's nothing down. So remove all those 5. And then the next thing you'll find is you can kind of pull it open from the top. So this is the top of the calculator on the side. There's the printer mechanism. And then you've got this bottom piece here. And it's got an interesting kind of on both halves of the clamshells, it's got a molded piece here, and then there's a molded receptacle on the bottom. So it's kind of pushed together. And what you want to do is you kind of just want to gently push your thumb up on this top part as you're holding the bottom part. And it'll come apart. It's not really particularly difficult. However, at the same time, you've got all these pins, and you can see here's corrosion. So this one particular model I had a lot of corrosion on the pins before I cleaned it up. So there's a set of 12 pins here. There's also another set of, I think, 9 pins that go back here. So while you're gently pushing this forward, you're also kind of lifting this PC board off these pins. It's not too hard, and it'll come up, and what happens is this PC board's attached to a keyboard connector. This whole half comes off, so your There's the display up here, so the top half comes off with this PC board, and then you're left with the bottom half with the bottom PC board and the printer. So it doesn't come apart too bad. Putting it together is a whole nother trick, though. So
Yes, it is.
it is. And there we go. All right, so, and you're here, you've got the bottom half, the top half you set aside. There's 3 brass screws that hold the printer in place. Those are pretty easy to get to, not a big deal to take those apart. And once you get the printer disassembled, or at least removed, those 3 screws, it'll pull out. And then if you want to just take the motor off, you can just take these 2 brass screws out, and they come out. You'll still see the wires, and we'll go back to that in a minute. Wires kind of loop back here, and they're kind of pressed in some really neat, unique single wire connectors. You know. And the good news is, if you got a really pristine version of this, those wire connectors are really nice, and you can pull the wires in. And HP has used I think it must be a solid wire in there that they've used for both there's 4 wires that come back and connect here. There's the motor wires, and there's a home switch for the printer. And they just gently pull out, and you can actually gently push them back in again. So as long as there's no corrosion, it's great. If there's corrosion, it's bad news, because that means those wires are stuck down in there. And in my experience, no amount of white vinegar and soaking can fix that connector connection. In fact, I think I've got 3 now that I'll probably end up having to solder the wires back in, because and I can't find a replacement for that particular PC board connector either. So I don't know if it's something HP made or had made for them to connect. You can get them out, but it would be hard to find a replacement. But you can solder the wires, or you can find maybe I'm looking for some very small connectors, some wire connectors, some splice connectors. So let's see. So here you are. So, so here's the wires connectors I'm talking about. These will gently just pull out, and they just pull out of the board. And there's a ground connection here. That's a signal connection, and this is the power wire going up to the motor. And then you've got the printer assembly. So that really well takes the printer assembly out. Here you're seeing the motor. Here's the printer head. Here's the flex cable that goes off to the PC board, and it's probably still hanging onto the PC board over here. And then there's two bars in here. There's a steel bar that guides the print head across the face of the printer, and then there's a screw drive. And it's really kind of an interesting drive. This motor only turns clockwise, and it always turns clockwise. It never reverses. So when this travels across here, it's got an interesting mechanism. There's a piece that fits down in here, and the way it's been machined is it actually will reverse direction and go back. So when it gets down to this end travel, then it just automatically goes back. There's a home switch down here, so it says, "Oh, I'm in home position. Stop me if if I've done printing." So pretty interesting, and it's different from the 97 and the other printers, from the desktop printers, because they actually do reverse direction in that case. So what happens now? Typical problems. The print head moves, but you only have partially formed characters. Or you don't have any printed characters. Or the head doesn't move. Then the print head moves, but again, no characters at all. Or you'd have double-sized printing. I've had that case. Or the paper doesn't feed. Or you've got continuous running of the printer motor. So these are all some interesting artifacts that happen with 19Cs. This is actually just a blown-up picture of the print head. And we'll talk about the print head and the print elements on there. So one of the causes is, if there is corrosion inside the 19C, you may get corrosion on the flex cable. And actually Bernard's done quite a bit of talk about this, but he didn't necessarily talk about repair on it. So what I've done is, here's a piece of flex cable, and this is the cable that goes into the connector on the PC, on the lower PC board. It's very difficult to take out. There's some tools that people have formed to help remove it and not destroy it any more than it is. And here's what you'll see is, you'll see battery corrosion, took some of the gold plating off here. There's cracks that it resulted in actually a broken connection up in here. And this is actually where the cable actually folds in half and fits inside the connector. So what you can do is you can actually bridge this. You can scrape this off and take a little piece of wire and you can solder those. So you can actually repair that, and the flex cable can be repaired. So if this condition exists, these can be repaired in this area. And I think I've got a cable now that's got 3 or 4 of these cracks on it. I'm about ready to do the repair on those and fix that. So don't despair if the cable, if it's not printing, it doesn't mean that the printhead's bad. It may happen, it's just the cable's damaged, the flex cable's damaged. So, what are some other things? No printed characters, the head doesn't move, or the printhead moves but does not print. So, can be a variety of root causes. And didn't get time to dive into all of them, so I'm just kind of gloss over these. So, printer motor drive electronics could be bad, the printhead electronics are bad, thermal printhead's damaged, or the flex circuit's broken or partially broken like we just talked about on the last slide. The PIC IC is faulty. PC board's corroded or printer wires are damaged, or the printer motor is damaged itself. And actually there's a little gear mechanism inside that's attached to the motor, and that actually can be disassembled, and you can oil it a little bit and clean it out. And you can actually connect up you connect up about 3 volts to the motor as it's just sitting there on a DC bench and verify that the motor runs. So you can verify certain things that are working and not working, and start eliminating some of these things. So the printhead drive and print electronics can be replaced from common components. So that's the PC board version of it. Printhead, we haven't found a replacement for the printhead, so that's really difficult. And so don't despair, but if there are elements burned out on the printhead, it's basically not going to print. So there's 7 wires that go up to that printhead, and if something is overcurrented, cause it to burn out, that printhead, that pin won't work. So often the PC board can be cleaned and restored, if it's corroded from battery leakage. So generally, at least I think of all my 19Cs, I don't think I've got any IC damage on it, from at least the PIC or the ACT. The PIC or the ACT chips aren't damaged, then the rest of the parts can be replaced. There's transistors and the driver chips can be replaced. So there's a lot of things that could happen to it that won't damage it, but there's also some interesting things about the way that the printhead is working. So there's double side printing, no paper feed, and continuous running of printer motor. So these are things that can be diagnosed. So if there's a printhead switch, and actually it's got gold-plated contacts on it, so the printhead switch, the home switch, should last forever. I mean, I haven't seen any of those that have gone bad. I've seen a wire disconnect. That's one I just diagnosed last week. So I just had to resolder the wire on it. And that will cause the printhead to keep moving back and forth because it will never find the home position. So printhead jam, sometimes people will try to feed the paper up there and get the paper jammed in there. You don't want to try to do that. You want to be pretty gentle when you're throwing it in there.
How can you, I have a 10 that will not feed paper. I've taken little narrow strips and fed it through and gone back and forth. Is there a feeler in there,
Nope.
some sort of contact?
Is that there is a piece of, there's a gear mechanism that rolls the paper up through there, and is there,
Are there rubber rollers that catch the paper and pull it?
I don't think so, but I haven't quite gotten back into that piece of it. And I think there's a gear on the front, and you'll see that in a minute. And then it meshes with another gear mechanism that I think moves a little piece of plastic up and moves the paper up as it moves.
Pressure on the paper.
Yeah, every time there's actually a little cam action. Every time this printhead moves, it's a little cam that moves across, and then it increments the paper up. Every time it goes back towards home, it moves it up just a little bit. It'll move back here, it'll print, and as it finishes printing, it'll move the paper back up again. So,
Do you know, is the printer module for 10 and 19 the same? Could you?
I don't know, because I haven't seen a 10 yet, so. or I haven't seen a repair service manual for a 10. So that would be good to find out.
Yeah, we're not gonna get the same answer. He's like,
Yeah.
when I get one, I'll tell you.
There you go. I could tell you, the same thing, right? But a lot of these things, again, I don't know that, I haven't seen a damaged printer motor yet. Corrosion, obviously with issues with, just battery leakage, Printhead, the printhead could be jammed, and I actually just diagnosed one a couple weeks ago where the bottom PC board somehow come dislodged and it just moved up slightly, and it actually moved past a piece of plastic on the print mechanism, and it was causing a jam of the printhead. It moves back and forth, and it would hit one of the transistors on there. It's like, why isn't this printing? Oh, okay. And open it up and just push the PC board back down. So there are some things that can happen, and I don't know how that got. I know a guy shipped it to me, and so something happened either during shipping or something. It shouldn't have been that way. Because when I opened the printer, it was almost pristine. I mean, there was nothing corroded in it. In fact, if you ever take the screws out of the printer, you can tell when they've never been moved. They've got that hard little turn at the start, and then all of a sudden they're freed, right? And you can tell it's just never been taken apart, right? So let's dive into this. So a couple things about this assembly, and you shouldn't really ever have to take the printer if you're really going to go down to this level. I just want to warn you, there's no way to take, or you shouldn't be going past a certain point, and we'll get to that. So there's a little plastic clip on here that really comes out very easily, and there's a really interesting part about this is when you're disassembling, there's one spring that applies pressure through the back horizontal bar, and it's behind this. You don't want to get down to that point, because if you get down to that point, that spring will fly out and you'll never find it again. Or I got lucky twice and found it as it flew out of my hands. So and we'll show that. But 99.9%, you don't need to disassemble it past a certain point here, and I'll show you that. So once we get to this, here's the print head. Let's examine this. I thought I did that, Eric. When I clicked it.
Stupid pop-up advertising.
So this was kind of it. This is the first slow motion video I've done with my phone. So this will take just a minute, but you'll see the printhead. You can just actually pull it out. It's actually just slid into this mechanism, into the printhead mechanism. So it actually just slides out. And this is going to, a little bit of anticipation here because it took longer to show this. Let's see, okay. On my Mac, it slid out much farther. But actually this head comes all the way out, and it just slides out of that mechanism. So it's actually not, it's held in by pressure. And the key thing is depending on where this printhead is, here's another error that can happen. If somebody's been messing with this, they can have this down here where it won't print correctly, or it can be pushed up too high. So you kind of want to get it, the top edge needs to be even with this pressure bar. So that's just a thing you'll notice if you got one, that's where it should be. So if you really want to go a little bit further, this is not too destructive. So there's two circlips. There's one here on this upper bar, and there's one on the lower drive mechanism bar. And those can be pulled out with a pair of tweezers or a small pair of needle nose pliers. And you can pull those out. Once you get them out, you can kind of slide this out. This one actually will slide all the way out, which is the guide bar. And then there's a printer dry screw. That one you can kind of angle out and pull it out. And at this point, you can see I've taken this ribbon cable out of the connector. I would strongly recommend, if this is not damaged, to not take that out. Just only from the sense of you can't damage that flex cable. But there is a tool, a way you can make a tool to pull it out. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is there's 4 brass pins, 2 on either side. Don't take them out. They're not shafts, they're individual pins, and I'll show you a picture later on. These two, the upper 2, you definitely don't want to take out. The bottom 2 control the gear, actually, for controlling the paper feed mechanism. You can remove these, and you can take out the little gear feed on the bottom of it. But you really don't see much if you get to that point. And I would just recommend leaving them in if you really don't really need to do much. So, this is really as far as you want to go. You don't really want to go past this, and you're really not going to find anything else out about the printer mechanism. This is a little bar that meshes with the printhead when it moves back and forth, and it moves this bar up, and it actually advances the paper. So when it moves over here, it actually contacts this bar and moves it up to the point, and then it drops back down once it gets to the home page. This is the I was talking about the home contacts. These wires connect to that, and it doesn't matter which way you connect those. They're isolated. One goes to ground and one goes to signal. So this is really as far as you want to go.
Spoken like someone who goes beyond it.
Speaking from experience,
Apparently,
I think.
it says, all right. This says, because you're curious, you went too far. Oh no. So now you've removed the 2 of the 4 pins and you've taken this upper mechanism out. See this little spot here? That's where the spring went that you just lost, and it flew out somewhere. You don't know where that spring is. That's the spring that you're looking for. And it's not that big. So good luck. I found it twice. I have wooden floors where my lab is, so it was a good thing, and I have a very bright light. I can go down and look for things. So anyhow, this is the mechanism that I took out, and that's the spring. And it's not so much that you can't get it apart. It's getting this thing back together and getting that spring compressed properly and getting it back into, you've got about 4 pieces you've all got to hold together. So you need 3 hands, which none of us have, right? So it's extremely difficult to get back and to make sure you don't deform the spring at the same time. And like I said, there's really not a reason to have it. So anyhow, there it is all apart. Just for, general purposes, for people who want to see everything. There are the 4 brass pins. There's the spring you don't want to lose. There's the 2 motor screws. This is another small spring, although this one isn't quite as catastrophic. It doesn't spring quite as hard. It's not as springy of a spring. This is the brass pin that goes inside the printhead mechanism. It's held down by, spring goes on top of it, and it's held down by this mechanism, and the head slides up through that direction. So once you put it all back together and get this drive mechanism, this is what handles keeps the printhead from moving back. It keeps it moving back and forth, as the motor moves. So anyhow, there's an exploded view of it. I'm not going to read all this. I'll let you. It's in your packet. You can read about it. But it's just basically reassembling it, and it's basically reverse. And the things that you want to look at is the challenge really is when you get everything back together, and the screws go in pretty easily, and you assemble everything back into it, is getting this bottom 2 edges together. So you want to get the bottom 2 edges of the case together, but it's getting those 21 pins lined up on there and lining those 2 PC boards up, and you almost again need 3 hands to do it. And I've finally come up with a technique of getting a very bright light in there and lining the top 9 pins first, and then you get the other 12 on the side pushed up, and then you got to kind of push the PC boards together with 2 of your hands while you're trying to
Tell
nudge.
the truth, how many pins did you bend?
I haven't bent any pins yet. I'm very gentle. Yeah. I've done this dozens of times. So anyhow, once you get to that point, then you can close the 2 halves of the case, and everything goes back together. So in summary, just wanted to share some diagnostic approaches of the 19C. I'm going to expand this hopefully next year and really dive into some more of the signals and electrical diagnosis and some possible other things that can go on with why the motor isn't running or what's happening with, I've got one that's the motor kind of turns on and off, so there's something that's going on I haven't quite been able to track down. Talk a little bit about the printhead and Panamatic. Actually, Bernard's done a lot of work on this, and he's basically destroyed at least one of these and said, don't do that, you don't take this brake part off because it's like ultrasonically bonded thermal wires in there, so you don't want to mess with that. But most of you won't go to this level, but just wanted to say, hey, here's how you take it apart. you probably want to get to a certain point where you don't want to take it apart anymore. For Bernhardt, you know, it's been invaluable. He and I exchange emails quite frequently, and of course, the Museum of HP Calculators and everybody that's contributed that, and it's probably many of these people in the room there have got information on it. So I appreciate your help and your assistance. Yes.
How many of these printers did you destroy in the process of acquiring this information?
I haven't destroyed anything yet, so it's still, there's still, I think I acquired my 10th 19C, so I'm still trying to work. I got 5 of them working, so most of them come in. I think 3 of them came in very nice condition, where I just virtually just had to replace the batteries. And no battery corrosion. 4 of them had battery corrosion, which I've had to do a lot of work and trying to repair it. And
The
then
batteries are NiCad, right?
either NiCad or somebody's replaced them, they'll put nickel metal hydride, but normally they're NiCads, right?
Is this the removable to charge?
Yeah.
You have to take it out.
No, you can
No.
actually charge it in the
And if I
calculator.
right,
It's not, this has got, the circuit is not designed like the wood stops.
that's my question.
Yeah. It will tend not to destroy itself.
You can't burn it out without the battery, running it without the battery?
You shouldn't run it without, I mean, you shouldn't, in there, it takes a lot of current, a lot more current than I would have expected.
No, the printer's not going there.
No, the printer's not going, it's just 100 milliamps just sitting there.
That's a
Just
lot.
turn on, it's the LED's on, so. Yep.
If you were gonna give the printer in the 19 a grade, after having dug into a lot of other, I'm sure, printer things, based on not only design, but functionality, what would you give it? How does it compare in terms of overall? I know it's a different machine and everything, but what do you think? Is it
I mean, it's
good?
pretty simple. I mean, pretty straightforward as far as it's pretty simple as far as its operation. I kind of like the fact that the motor just turns in one direction, but you know, in that way, although in that sense, it has to go all the way across. The 97 doesn't. If it doesn't have to print everything, it stops and then goes back. So it's actually traveling a lot more, and so it's a little more wear on the mechanism. I've got one of those brass pieces I've looked at that looks like it's worn quite a bit more than any other one I've seen.
Did you ever find out who actually made the printer? Because HP did not build that, it was
Oh,
somehow.
I have no idea.
It's very unique.
David?
How can you get the entire part of the HP-19 without mentioning the decimal points?
What, I stated about the decimal points?
How can you give an entire part of the HP-19 without mentioning?
Oh. You know, I thought I'd put one of the blown up decimal points on here. I know Katie Wasserman has a beautiful one on there, but yeah, if I don't know, how many of you know about the decimal points on the 19s? Like half a dozen of them, right? Okay. So if you blow a decimal point up large enough, I don't know what magnification means, maybe, yeah, maybe 500 to 1,000.
Oh.
You will actually see the letters HP as the decimal point. The actual decimal points are actually. So if you look it up, Katie's got a nice blow up. I think actually maybe on her, she may be using it as her logo on the HP.
Well, now, is it it's an LED diode, but it's printed HP on there small?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you have, it lights up
In the LED.
HP. It looks like a red dot. You
Oh,
can't
but
discern
there's
it.
the letters of HP?
Yeah, it has the letter HP. Now, it's probably one single diode, but
I'm trying to imagine.
they may have etched it in such a way that
Have a
it
mask or something?
just may have been masked that way.
Is this, which calculator is it on?
19C.
Oh, 19C. Only, not the 35 or the 67.